I needed her to admit it because somehow, hearing her say the words would make it real. It would make the nightmare real. "You've been talking to him, haven't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My throat felt tight, and it was hard to breathe. She nodded, her face contorted with pain and shame. "Yes," she said, the word barely audible. It was meant to be the happiest day of my life. A day I'd marry the woman I believed I knew better than anyone else. The day I'd walk down the aisle with the person I thought I'd share the rest of my life with. For years, we had built a love that felt like it belonged in the movies, the kind of connection most people dream of. Everything seemed perfect. But then, the day before our wedding, my world fell apart. I discovered something that my fiancé had been keeping from me, a secret that would turn everything upside down. I never imagined this could happen to me. Never thought I'd find myself standing at the edge of a life-altering decision. Could I marry someone who had betrayed me? Could I even bring myself to look at her the same way again? Stay with me as I share the truth of what happened on the night before my wedding and the decision I was forced to make. One that would change my life forever. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. And while you're here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because family means everything. Let's grow this channel together. In just a few moments, I'll reveal how I found out, what was running through my mind, and the single choice I had to make that left both me and my fiancé in an unexpected place. But before we get to that, let me take you back to where it all began. How we got to this point in the first place. When you're in love, everything seems flawless, doesn't it? At least that's what I thought. About a year ago, I met Emily. It was one of those encounters that felt like fate. You know, the kind where everything just clicks right away. When we talked for the first time, it felt as though I'd known her forever. That's the magic of it. She was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Of course, she was beautiful, but it wasn't just that. Emily was smart, funny, and had this remarkable way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. Before long, I realized I was falling for her. Not just for the surface-level things, but for her kindness, her thoughtfulness, and the way she truly listened when I spoke. It was a connection unlike anything I had ever experienced. In those first few months, everything was seamless. Every conversation flowed naturally, and every moment together felt effortless. We talked about everything, our pasts, our hopes for the future. There was never any tension or misunderstanding. It all just worked. I know it sounds cliche, but I genuinely believed I had found the one. We began making big plans for our future, discussing where we'd live and the kind of life we wanted to build. Then one night after dinner in the city, I thought to myself, this is it. She's the woman I'm going to marry. I'd never been so sure of anything in my life. So I started taking steps to make that future a reality. I wanted to show her how serious I was about us, about forever. It was time to take the next step. I began planning the proposal. Months went into making it perfect, something unforgettable. I didn't just want it to be a proposal. I wanted it to be an experience, something that would reflect how much she meant to me. I wanted her to feel special, to know that she was everything to me. So, I planned a trip to Paris. Visiting Paris had always been her dream, and I knew proposing there would be unforgettable. We spent the day exploring, walking through the city's charming streets, soaking in its beauty. But as the day wore on, the butterflies in my stomach grew stronger. The moment I'd been preparing for was getting closer. As the sun began to set, we made our way to the Eiffel Tower. The city lights sparkled below us, casting a warm glow over everything. And there, standing at the top of the world, I got down on one knee. I pulled out the ring I had carefully chosen for her, the one I thought she'd adore. Looking in her eyes, I asked her the question, "Will you marry me?" Her face lit up with a joy I'd never seen before. She was glowing. She said yes. For a moment, it felt like time stood still. Nothing else in the world mattered. We embraced, and in that instant, I felt like I was on top of the world. It all seemed perfect, or at least, that's what I thought. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of activity. Meeting vendors, selecting a venue, choosing invitations. Each step brought more excitement, building anticipation for the big day. We spent hours dreaming about our future together, imagining where we'd live, how many kids we'd have, and the life we'd create. It felt like everything was falling into place, and I couldn't wait to start this new chapter with Emily. Yet, behind the smiles and the excitement, something wasn't quite right. At first, everything during our engagement felt like a dream come true. But as the wedding day approached, the atmosphere began to shift. It wasn't anything overt, just subtle changes that were hard to pin down. Emily's behavior began to feel different. She seemed distracted, often lost in thought, staring off into space as though her mind was elsewhere. I tried to rationalize it. Surely it was just stress. Weddings are overwhelming, and nerves can get the best of anyone. But these moments, these small signs, started to add up. There was a distance growing between us, something unspoken that I couldn't quite place. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just pre-wedding jitters. After all, we were so close to the finish line, and I didn't want to question everything we'd built together. But deep down, I began to wonder, was there something I was missing? Was it really just nerves? As much as I tried to ignore it, the doubt lingered in the back of my mind. The wedding was a week away, and I kept telling myself to focus on the excitement. Yet, the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. Looking back, I should have trusted my instincts. The signs were there. I just didn't want to see them. The night before the wedding, everything was in place. The guests were en route, the flowers were ready, and the cake had been prepared. It was supposed to be a night filled with joy and anticipation. Instead, it became the night that changed everything. That was the night I discovered the truth. There was no warning, no inkling of what was about to unfold. I had no idea that everything I thought I knew about Emily, about us, was about to unravel. When it happened, it broke me. It shattered the foundation of everything I believed in, everything we had built together. I didn't know how to process it, how to even begin understanding what had just happened. Now, looking back, the signs were there all along. I just couldn't see them for what they were. It had started small, little things that seemed insignificant at the time. I chalked it up to stress, to the pressures of planning a wedding. After all, weddings are overwhelming. The endless decisions and expectations can leave anyone feeling stretched thin. Emily had her moments, like any bride-to-be, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It wasn't just the usual pre-wedding stress. There was a distance in her eyes, a sense of detachment that I hadn't noticed before. At first, I dismissed it. We were busy. The wedding was just days away. It had to be nothing. But as the small moments accumulated, they became harder to ignore. Emily started pulling away. She canceled plans we'd been excited about. I'd see her on her phone more often, but when I asked about it, her answers felt evasive. Just work or a quick change of subject. There was a hesitation in her voice, a subtle shift in her energy. She wasn't cold or unkind, but she wasn't fully present either. Not in the way she used to be. When we went out, her attention drifted. I'd catch her glancing at her phone or looking around the room, almost like she was expecting someone. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things. We were both busy with last-minute wedding preparations. It made sense for her to be stressed. But even as I tried to convince myself, that small, nagging feeling stayed with me. Something had changed, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't until just a few days before the wedding that the first real red flag appeared, though at the time, I still couldn't bring myself to believe it. We had planned a date night, a quiet evening for just the two of us, a momentary escape from all the wedding chaos. I picked her up, and we headed to a cozy Italian restaurant we both loved. At first, everything seemed fine, or so I thought. But during dinner, I started noticing something strange. Emily kept checking her phone, not just once or twice, but repeatedly. She'd glance down, tap a few things, and then quickly look back up at me, almost like she was trying to hide something. Every time I looked in her direction, she'd stiffen slightly, almost imperceptibly, as if worried I might see what was on her screen. I couldn't ignore it anymore, so I decided to ask. I've never been the kind of person to pry, but in that moment, the uneasiness got the better of me. "Who are you texting so much?" I asked, trying to keep the question lighthearted. Her smile faltered, just for a moment. She quickly shrugged it off. "Oh, it's just some work stuff. You know how it is." I don't want to be rude and not answer. Her response didn't sit right with me. There was a strain in her voice, something forced, unnatural. When she noticed me glancing at her phone, she quickly put it away. Too quickly. Her hands trembled slightly, but I told myself it was nothing. It's just pre-wedding nerves, I thought. She's stressed, that's all. But later that night, as we lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling. My mind kept replaying the dinner, fixating on the subtle changes in her behavior. I'd never seen her so secretive before. It wasn't like Emily to keep things from me, especially over something as minor as a phone message. My gut told me something was off. The next day, I tried to ignore it. There were still wedding details to finalize, family arriving in town, and the excitement of the big day looming. But even amidst the whirlwind of activity, Emily's distance became more noticeable. She started canceling plans. Small things, at first lunches, phone calls with my family, and a visit to the florist. Each time, she claimed she was too tired or that something had come up. Then came the night before the wedding. The house was eerily quiet. Emily had been withdrawn all day. Not hostile, just absent, as if her thoughts were somewhere else entirely. There were no arguments, no big signs, just that persistent feeling that something wasn't right. I was in the living room, going over the final details, when I saw her phone sitting on the counter. My curiosity got the best of me. I know some people would say I shouldn't have looked, but at that point, I didn't know what else to do. The tension had been building for days, and my gut told me I needed to know. Her phone was unlocked. Without hesitation, I picked it up and opened her messages. What I saw hit me like a punch in the stomach. It was a series of texts, messages between Emily and her ex-boyfriend. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. The messages were recent, just a few days old. My stomach churned as I read through them. They talked about meeting up after the wedding. Flirty exchanges, private jokes, things that felt far too intimate. And then there it was, a message that stood out like a flashing warning sign. Can't wait to see you again. Just a few more days until we can be together. We'll figure this out after the wedding. Time seemed to stop. I couldn't breathe. Everything I had believed about our relationship, about Emily, collapsed in an instant. She had been seeing him all along. While we were planning our future together, she was still in contact with him. The betrayal wasn't just heartbreaking, it was devastating. It felt like everything I thought was real had been shattered in a single moment. I wanted to confront her immediately. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I slowly placed the phone back down, moving mechanically as though trying to avoid making the nightmare more real. I was paralyzed by shock, by anger, by confusion. Above all, I was terrified of what this meant for us, for everything we'd built. Terrified by what I had uncovered. I knew I had to confront her. I knew that without this conversation, nothing would ever be the same. But I didn't know if I was ready to face the truth. As I stared at her phone, the weight of everything pressed heavily on my chest. One question kept repeating in my mind. How could she do this to me? The thought echoed endlessly, refusing to let go. I couldn't stop thinking about those messages, about the lies she had been hiding from me all this time. It felt like the ground beneath me was giving way. Everything I thought I knew, everything I thought we had, was slipping through my fingers. All I could do was stare at her phone. Her phone. I knew I needed to talk to her. The silence that night felt unbearable, like I was holding my breath and waiting for something inevitable to happen. But I couldn't figure out how to approach it. How do you confront someone you love with the truth you've just discovered? How do you even begin to put together the pieces of a reality that's been shattered? I went to bed, but sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the words from that message burned in my mind. I couldn't stop imagining the worst-case scenarios. What if she was planning to leave me? What if our entire future had been a lie? I was terrified. I wanted to confront her immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of her reaction. Maybe it was the fear of losing everything we had built. The morning arrived, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. It was the day before the wedding. My best man was on his way to help with final preparations. Guests would be arriving soon, and everything was supposed to be perfect. But inside, I felt like I was drowning. Each passing minute felt heavier, like the pressure was building, threatening to crush me. I knew I had to face her. I went downstairs and found her in the kitchen, sipping her coffee. She was still in her robe, her hair slightly messy, but she looked normal. When she smiled at me, it wasn't the same smile I had grown to love. It didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning," she said, but there was a strain in her voice, as if she was trying too hard to pretend everything was fine. I nodded, but didn't say anything at first. I just stood there, staring at her. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe? Fear. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the phone, show her the messages, and demand an explanation. But instead, I stayed silent. I didn't know how to begin. So I did what I always did when I try to hold things together. I buried the anger, the confusion, the hurt, and acted like everything was fine. I asked her about the final wedding details. I asked her about her dress fitting. I pretended that I didn't know, but it couldn't last. As we talked, I saw her growing more nervous. Her eyes avoided mine, and when they did meet, her gaze felt forced. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her robe. It was clear she knew something was coming. "Emily," I said quietly, my voice firmer than I intended. "There's something we need to talk about." She froze. For a moment, time seemed to stop. She didn't move, didn't speak. Her face grew pale, and I could see it in her eyes. She knew. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say, but I had to break the silence. I had to ask the question that had haunted me since the moment I read those messages. "Who is he?" I finally asked. The air seemed to leave the room as soon as the words were spoken. Her expression was indescribable, a mixture of shock, guilt, and confusion. She opened her mouth, then closed it, struggling to find the words. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, might try to tell me I was imagining things. But then, her eyes dropped to the floor, and I knew. I don't know how to explain," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's complicated. It's not what you think." My heart broke as she spoke. I didn't need the details. I didn't need her to explain. The betrayal was already laid out in black and white. Nothing she said could undo it. But I needed to hear it. I needed her to admit it because somehow, hearing her say the words would make it real. It would make the nightmare real. "You've been talking to him, haven't you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My throat felt tight, and it was hard to breathe. She nodded, her face contorted with pain and shame. "Yes," she said, the word barely audible. I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't. Her words didn't register at first. It was like I was on autopilot, hearing her, but not truly listening. She continued, explaining how it all began when they reconnected by chance. She said she hadn't intended to fall back into old patterns, but she had. At first, it was only emotional. She claimed nothing physical. But then it grew, and she couldn't stop herself. She said she didn't know how to break it off, didn't know how to tell me, and now she didn't know how to fix it. It was like hearing every one of my worst fears come to life. The one person I trusted more than anyone, the one I believed would never hurt me, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And she wasn't truly sorry. Not for what she had done. She was sorry she got caught. Sorry the lie couldn't continue, but not sorry for her actions. I stood there, struggling to process what I was hearing. Nothing made sense. The future I had envisioned with her vanished in an instant. In that moment, I realized no amount of explanation could undo the damage. I couldn't trust her anymore. I couldn't marry her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mind was flooded with questions. How long had this been going on? How could she lie to me every day? Why hadn't she told me sooner? But none of those questions mattered anymore. One thing was clear. I couldn't marry her. I couldn't go through with it. Without a word, I turned and walked out of the room. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Then the weight of it all hit me. The wedding was tomorrow. All the plans, the money, the guests, it all felt meaningless now. Everything I thought I had was slipping through my fingers. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront her again? Should I leave? The decision felt impossible. I felt paralyzed, numb. I didn't even know who I was anymore. I didn't know who she was. The woman I loved, the woman I was ready to marry, was a stranger now. And so, I made the only choice I could. I couldn't stay. I had to leave. But how could I walk away when everything was already in motion? How could I abandon the life we had planned together? Every hope, every dream, I had built my entire future around her. But now it was all crumbling before my eyes. The wedding didn't matter anymore. The dress, the venue, the guests, none of it meant anything. How could I stand in front of everyone and pretend it was all okay? I walked out of the kitchen and out of the house, desperate for space, desperate for air. But no matter how far I walked, the truth followed me, suffocating me. I felt like I was drowning. Aimlessly, I wandered the streets, barely noticing where I was going. The world around me felt distant, like I was trapped in a fog. Nothing made sense. And then, amidst the chaos, a realization struck me. No matter how hard I tried to hold on to the life we had, it was already gone. The woman I thought I knew, the person I had built everything with, was gone too. All the plans, the dreams, they were built on a lie. She wasn't who I thought she was. And if I stayed, I'd be living a lie, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I stood on a street corner for what felt like hours, my mind spinning. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of doing it felt insurmountable. Could I really walk away? Could I cancel everything? Could I destroy her life the way she had destroyed mine? I wanted to scream, to rage against the injustice of it all. Every moment we had shared, every laugh, every promise, they all felt tainted now, like nothing was real. How could I stay? How could I look her in the eye after knowing what I did? The same question kept haunting me. Could I forgive her? Could I look past the betrayal, the lies, and rebuild the trust? I wanted to believe in love, to believe it could conquer anything. I wanted to convince myself this wasn't her fault, that we had simply drifted apart. But then I thought about the lies, about how she had looked me in the eye day after day and lied, how she had been seeing him behind my back, making plans to meet him, telling him she couldn't wait to be with him. I couldn't ignore that. I found myself standing in front of a coffee shop, the hum of traffic in the background. I didn't even remember walking there. I just knew I needed to make a decision. I didn't want to go back to the house, not yet. I wasn't ready to face her. I needed more time to think, but I also knew I couldn't wait forever. The wedding was still on, and the clock was ticking. I called my best man. I needed another voice, someone who had been there from the beginning, someone who had seen Emily and me together, someone who could help me make sense of everything. He picked up after the second ring. "Hey man," he said, "where are you? You good?" I paused, not knowing how to answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can marry her." There was silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice cautious. "Is this about the wedding? Are you having second thoughts?" I hesitated. How could I put it into words? How could I explain everything? "No," I said, my voice breaking. "It's not second thoughts. I found out she's been seeing someone else. Someone from her past." Another long pause followed. Then he spoke, his voice steady but firm. "You have to do what's right for you, man. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but you can't ignore this. You can't pretend it's all going to work out if it's already broken." His words hit me hard like a blow to the chest. I wanted to be angry, to lash out at him for saying it, but I knew he was right, and that terrified me. Calling off the wedding would destroy everything. Her life, my life, everything we had worked toward. But staying meant living a lie, being trapped in a relationship built on betrayal. I couldn't do that. I didn't know what to say to him. My mind kept circling back to Emily, to her face when I confronted her, to her trembling hands, to the life we had built together and how quickly it had unraveled. Then I thought about the wedding, the guests, the cake, the vows. How could I stand there and make promises when all I felt was anger and confusion? I thanked my best man for listening, but I knew this was a decision I had to make on my own. I walked back to the house, still unsure, still filled with doubt. My thoughts raced as I tried to make sense of everything, but deep down, I knew what I had to do. When I entered the living room, Emily was sitting there, still in her robe, her eyes cast downward. She looked up when she heard me, her expression hesitant, like she had been waiting for me to say something, to decide. "We need to talk," I said, my voice rough, almost breaking. "I know what you've been doing. I know what's going on, and I can't pretend anymore. I can't go through with this. Her face fell. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Fear filled her eyes. I could see how terrified she was of losing me, but I was terrified too, terrified of losing myself. I can't stay in this relationship, I said quietly. I can't be with someone who didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth. I can't marry someone who's already broken my trust. She stared at me, but I couldn't read her expression anymore. I looked at her one last time, trying to make sense of everything, but there was no sense to be found. There was no going back. I turned and walked toward the door. The finality of it hit me like a cold wave. I wasn't just walking away from her, from the wedding. I was walking away from the life I thought I was going to have. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't live in a lie any longer. I couldn't stay with someone who had shattered my trust, no matter how much it hurt. I couldn't go through with the wedding. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. I had to make that choice, even though it felt like my entire world was collapsing around me. The next few hours passed in a blur. I don't remember much. What I said, how I managed the calls to the venue, the cancellations, or the fallout. I just knew I had made the only decision I could live with. All I knew was that I felt empty, numb. It was as if a part of me had been ripped away, and I had no idea how to get it back. Emily was still in shock. I could see it on her face. She hadn't said much after I walked out the door, but when I came back to tell her the wedding was off, the realization hit her. She wasn't angry at first. She just looked lost. Her wide eyes seemed to ask why this was happening, why I was doing this to her. But she knew. She knew exactly why, even if she wasn't ready to face it. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling. "Please just listen to me. I never meant for this to happen. I made a mistake, and I don't know how to fix it. But we can work through this. We can figure it out." I saw the tears welling in her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that love could fix this, that somehow we could find our way back to what we had before. But then I thought about the lies. I thought about the messages. I thought about everything she had hidden from me. That tiny part of me, the part willing to forgive, crumbled. "I can't do this," I said, shaking my head. My voice was firm, but it cracked. "I can't be with you after everything that's happened. I don't trust you anymore. I don't even know who you are." Something changed in her then. The fear on her face turned to anger, and though she tried to suppress it, it broke through. "You think this is easy for me?" she snapped. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to hurt you?" Her words cut through me, sharp and biting, but I didn't back down. "You should have thought about that before you made the choice to lie to me. Emily," I said, my voice steady. "You should have thought about that before you started seeing him behind my back. I gave you everything. I trusted you. And you betrayed that trust in the worst way possible." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands as she began to sob uncontrollably. I stood there, motionless, unsure of what to do. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to reach out and tell her it would be okay. But I couldn't, not after everything she had done. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at her, torn between my anger and my heartbreak. My mind raced with unanswered questions. How could she do this? How could she throw everything away for some fleeting excitement? How could she destroy everything we had built? None of it made sense. That night, I left the house. I couldn't stay there anymore. Not in that space, not in that moment. I got in my car and drove, with no destination in mind. I just needed to escape. I needed air, space, clarity. As I aimlessly navigated the streets, the weight of what I had lost pressed down on me. The wedding, the future we had planned, the life we were supposed to share, it was all gone. I had never envisioned myself in this position. I had never imagined being the one to call off the wedding, to walk away. I always feared Emily might leave me one day if something went wrong, but I never thought it would be because of her betrayal. The thought crushed me. The next few days passed in a haze. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Friends and family called, reaching out, but I ignored them. I couldn't explain what had happened. Not to them, and not even to myself. The pain was too raw. It felt like my heart had been ripped apart, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. The only thing I could do was take it one moment at a time. Then Emily started contacting me again. She called, texted, left messages, even showed up at my door. I didn't know what she expected. Did she think I would forgive her? Did she think I would come back? Every time I saw her name on my phone, anger and pain surged through me. I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal with her. Eventually, I blocked her number. I had to cut ties completely. I couldn't keep living in the past, trying to salvage something that was already destroyed. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about my own healing. I had to prioritize myself, even if it meant shutting her out entirely. There were days when I missed her, when I couldn't help but think about her. She had been such a huge part of my life for years. But then I would remember the messages, the secrets, the betrayal, and the hurt would rush back, fresh and sharp. And I knew, deep down, that walking away was the only choice I could have made. But the pain didn't stop. It lingered, a constant reminder of what I had lost and how my world had changed forever. It didn't stop the emptiness I felt every day. The sadness clung to me, following me wherever I went. I wasn't just grieving the relationship. I was mourning the life I thought I would have. The future we had planned was gone, and I didn't know how to move forward, or if I ever would. I began to question myself, wondering if I had missed the signs, if I had seen the truth and ignored it. Maybe I had been so caught up in the idea of love, in the idea of us, that I had overlooked reality. I couldn't figure out where it all went wrong, but I knew one thing. I had to rebuild. I had to start with myself before I could even consider moving on, let alone finding someone else, if that was even possible. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Slowly, I began to heal. It wasn't a quick process, nor was it easy. There were still moments when a photo, a familiar place we had visited, or even a random memory would stir the ache in my chest. But with time, the pain began to fade. I started to accept that it wasn't my fault. I had done what I needed to do. Then one day, I woke up and realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't holding on to the past. I was free. Free to move forward. Free to live my life without the weight of betrayal dragging me down. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a sense of peace. I still don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm no longer trapped in that lie. And for now, that's enough. Because I know I did the right thing. I made the choice that was best for me, even though it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But here's the thing. When you go through something like this, when your entire world is flipped upside down, and you're forced to confront the raw truth about someone you thought you knew, you don't just move on. Not right away. The betrayal, the heartbreak, it lingers, even when the dust has settled. Sometimes I still find myself thinking about it. I'll be sitting somewhere, lost in my thoughts, and her face will flash in my mind. Not the face of the woman I thought I would marry, but the face of the woman who hurt me. The one who lied. The one who kept secrets. It's like a shadow that never fully disappears. It's not that I miss her. God knows I don't. It's just that the entire experience, everything that happened, has shaped the person I am now. I'll never forget how it felt to realize the life I thought I was living was built on something false. I often think back to the time before the discovery, when everything seemed perfect, when I had no reason to question anything. Looking back now, it's strange how blind I was. I thought we had it all, the future, the plans, the love. I believed it was forever. But what I couldn't see, what I didn't see, were the cracks forming underneath. It's easy to think everything is secure, that the person you're with will always be there, that the life you've built together is solid. But sometimes, it's the things you don't see that destroy you, the lies you didn't even know existed. And no matter how tightly you try to hold on to that illusion, reality has a way of catching up to you, whether you're ready for it or not. The truth is, I still don't fully understand what went wrong. I don't know if Emily was always like this, or if it happened gradually. I don't know if she ever loved me the way I loved her, or if she had been pretending to. The unanswered questions are the hardest to live with. They linger like a broken record, replaying over and over in my mind. What was real? What was fake? How could I have missed the signs? Did I ever really know her at all? But as much as I've questioned myself, as much as I've doubted everything, I've learned something valuable. Something I never thought I would gain from an experience like this. I've learned how strong I am, I've learned that I can survive something like this and come out the other side. Even if it's messy, I've learned that it's okay to walk away. That sometimes the hardest thing to do is also the right thing to do. And I've learned that I can be alone and still be okay. I don't need someone else to define my worth. I am enough, just as I am. I've also learned that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. You can't just erase the hurt. You can't pretend it didn't happen. But in a strange way, that pain is what makes you stronger. Because you come to realize that you don't need anyone else to make you whole. You're already complete, even when it feels like you've been torn apart. There are days when I still think about the life we could have had, the plans, the future we envisioned. I won't lie, it hurts. Letting go of something you've invested so much in, something you thought was perfect, is incredibly hard. But I've learned that sometimes the most painful experiences in life teach us the most valuable lessons. It's in those darkest moments that you discover who you really are. When everything falls apart, you find out what you're truly made of. I've also learned to forgive. Not for her, not for anyone else, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment only weighs you down in the end. I don't want to carry that burden anymore. I don't want to be someone who is bitter and broken. I want to be free. I want to find peace. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, is the only way to get there. It's not about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about choosing to let go of the pain so it no longer controls your life. I've learned that, and as hard as it was to reach that point, letting go has been one of the most freeing things I've ever done for myself. Here's the truth. Even after all of it, the heartache, the betrayal, the mess, I can't say I regret it. Because in a strange way, I needed to go through it. I needed to confront the reality of who she was, of who I was, and understand that not everything in life is meant to last. Some things exist solely to teach us lessons. Maybe that's what this experience was meant to do. To show me that I can move on, that I can rediscover my strength, and that I don't need anyone else's validation to feel whole. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown, how far I've come. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready for it. Maybe it will bring love again. Maybe it will bring something else. But whatever it is, I'm no longer afraid. I'm not afraid to be myself, to be alone, or to walk my own path, even if it's not the one I imagined. I'm not afraid to be vulnerable or to trust again. Because in the end, I've learned that even when the worst happens, you can find the strength to rise again. And that's what matters most. So, to anyone who might be going through something similar, to anyone feeling lost or broken, hear me when I say this. You are stronger than you think. You don't have to stay in a situation that hurts you. You don't have to settle for less than you deserve. Most importantly, you are enough, just as you are. Don't let anyone take that from you. Life doesn't always go as planned, and that's okay. Even when it feels like we've lost everything, we gain so much more in the process. We gain ourselves, and that's something no one can take away. No matter what happens, no matter how much we've been hurt, the one thing we can always control is who we choose to become after the storm. I've chosen to move forward, to let this experience shape me into a stronger, wiser, and more self-aware person. And I hope you can do the same, no matter what you've been through. Looking back, it still feels surreal. It feels like a lifetime ago, and yet it's a part of me that I can never forget. The person I was before the betrayal is gone. He was someone who didn't fully know his worth, who didn't yet understand his strength. Maybe I had to go through the pain to become the person I am now. The journey hasn't been easy. There are still moments when the sting of it all resurfaces, but I can honestly say I'm at peace with it. I don't have all the answers, and maybe I never will. But I know I'm no longer living in the shadow of that betrayal. I'm living for myself now, and that's all I can ask for. As I move forward, I carry with me the lessons I've learned. I've come to understand that love doesn't come with guarantees, that trust has to be earned, and that once it's broken, it's not easily repaired. But I also carry the belief that life goes on, that there's always room for healing, growth, and new beginnings. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll love again. Maybe someday I'll find someone who treats me with the same respect, honesty, and loyalty I gave to her. For now, though, I'm focused on myself, on healing, on becoming the best version of me. And for now, that's enough. To anyone out there who can relate to this pain, this heartbreak, this betrayal, please know you're not alone. I've been there. I know how it feels to have your world shattered, to feel like everything has been turned upside down. But I also know that you are strong. You have the power to move forward, to heal, and to rebuild. You are worth so much more than the lies you've been told. Don't let anyone, no matter how much you care for them, make you feel otherwise. For those of you who've gone through something similar, or maybe you've been in a relationship that didn't turn out the way you had hoped, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think was the right decision in my situation? Should I have given her another chance? Should I have fought harder to save the relationship? Or was walking away the only choice I had? I really want to know your thoughts. I'll be in the comment section, reading through your insights and opinions. Please feel free to share your own experiences too. I know I'm not alone in this. Many of you have faced similar heartbreak, and maybe you have advice to share. Or maybe we can simply connect over the shared pain. Either way, I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn from you. Just as I hope you've been able to learn something from my story. Before you leave, if you think I made the right choice, please give this video a like. And if you faced a similar situation and found strength through it, I'd love to hear how you overcame it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss future stories. Every week, we dive into real-life experiences, sharing personal journeys of love, heartbreak, and healing. I want you to be a part of this journey with me. Stay connected, stay strong, and let's keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout this story. I hope it resonated with you, that you found something in it that spoke to your heart. Wherever you are in life, always remember this. You are stronger than you think, and you deserve so much more than just surviving. You deserve happiness. You deserve to be loved in the same way you give love to others. I'll see you in the next video.